Welcome to Litpoetry, the podcast where we go on a journey of discovery, reading, analyzing, and discussing great poetry from around the world. Poetry is worth it because the reading and writing of poetry is a revolutionary act that has the potential to transform both the reader and our world.
Welcome to Season 5, Episode 2 of the Litpoetry podcast. On the program today, we're featuring the haunting poem Annabel Lee by Edgar Allan Poe. So let's take a listen to the poem read to you today by Richard Armitage.
Annabel Lee by Edgar Allan Poe. It was many and many a year ago, in a kingdom by the sea, that a maiden there lived whom you may know, by the name of Annabel Lee. And this maiden, she lived with no other thought than to love and be loved by me. I was a child, and she was a child, in this kingdom by the sea. But we loved with a love that was more than love, I and my Annabel Lee, with a love that the winged seraphs of heaven coveted her and me. And this was the reason that long ago in this kingdom by the sea, a wind blew out of a cloud, chilling my beautiful Annabel Lee, so that her high-born kinsman came and bore her away from me, to shut her up in a sepulchre in this kingdom by the sea. The angels, not half so happy in heaven, went envying her and me. Yes, that was the reason, as all men know, in this kingdom by the sea, that the wind came out of the cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee. But our love, it was stronger by far than the love of those who are older than we, of many far wiser than we, and neither the angels in heaven above nor the demons down under the sea can ever dissever my soul from the soul of the beautiful Annabel Lee. For the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And the stars never rise but I feel the bright eyes of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And so all the night tide I lie down by the side of my darling, my life and my bride, in her sepulchre there by the sea, in her tomb by the sounding sea.
Before talking about the poem's major themes, let's take a moment to discuss the historical context of the poem. Edgar Allan Poe, a prominent figure in American and English literature, he was not only known as a writer but also as a prominent critic of American literature. He praised works that contributed to the establishment of a unique American literary tradition, distinct from British literature. Writers such as Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau, Walt Whitman and Herman Melville were among those whose works Poe admired and praised. He also held a great admiration for Charles Dickens' novels, with The Raven, one of his most famous poems, directly inspired by Dickens. Annabel Lee shares a common theme of the death of a beautiful young woman, which Poe considered, and I quote, the most poetical topic in the world. Poe's literary contributions were not limited to poetry, as he also authored classic short stories that are considered masterpieces of various genres. He played a significant role in establishing the Gothic genre in American literature and also ventured into detective fiction and science fiction. Annabel Lee itself contains elements commonly found in the Gothic genre, such as themes of death, the supernatural, and a fantastical setting. Poe's lasting impact on literature is immeasurable, and his influence is particularly evident in works of French symbolist poets. Furthermore, it's worth noting that Vladimir Nabokov's Lolita was partially inspired by Annabel Lee. The poem intentionally avoids any specific historical setting though, with only a vague mention that it was many and many a year ago. It was published in 1849, a relatively peaceful time in the United States. It is widely speculated that Annabel Lee may be inspired by Poe's real-life wife, Virginia Clem, who was also his cousin and married him at the young age of 13. Virginia passed away at the age of 24 due to tuberculosis, and her death seems to have had a profound impact on Poe, as dying women feature in many of his subsequent works. Welcome back. The first theme I want to discuss today is that of love. Annabel Lee tells the story of a young love that was tragically cut short. The speaker, often assumed to be based on Poe himself, who had experienced the death of his young wife before writing this poem, portrays the love between him and Annabel Lee as pure, everlasting and unconquerable. Despite the brevity of their time together, their love remains a formidable force that cannot be vanquished, not even by death. The poem argues that love is the most powerful force on earth. Right from the beginning, the speaker establishes that there is something magical about love. The opening stanza has a fairy tale-like quality, creating a supernatural ambience. The mention of many a year ago in the first stanza, akin to the traditional once upon a time, emphasises how this love is defined by its enduring nature. As the poem unfolds, the speaker presents a compelling case for the extraordinary power of their love, claiming that the speaker's soul will never be separated from Annabel Lee's, underscoring the concept of eternal survival against all odds. According to the speaker, their love in the poem is so potent that it transcends conventional bounds of human experience. Lines 5 and 6 depict Annabel Lee's entire existence revolving around her love for the speaker, and line 9 suggests that their love was even greater than the concept of love itself. In fact, their love surpasses earthly limitations and reaches a realm beyond. Their love is portrayed as so pure that even angels are envious of the young lovers, as we see in lines 21 to 22. Angels are typically seen as morally upright beings, but in this poem, the sight of a love that surpasses their own goodness makes them jealous and even murderous. This drastic change illustrates that the exceptional nature of this love can even disrupt the established rules of the spiritual realm. Moreover, despite the angel's actions, the speaker maintains that he and Annabel Lee will be eternally linked, even in the face of her death, as stated in line 32. Throughout the poem, the speaker asserts that love will ultimately triumph over all obstacles. While the poem Annabel Lee presents a romantic portrayal of the power of love, it also hints at darker possibilities. The speaker's unwavering insistence on the supernatural strength of his love for Annabel Lee may suggest a troubled or obsessive mind, potentially overwhelmed by the loss of his beloved. The speaker's claim to lie down beside Annabel Lee's body every night, although a poignant expression of eternal love, can also be unsettling if taken literally, implying a possible descent into madness. This portrayal of insanity raises questions about the reliability of the speaker's romantic claims. If the speaker's memories are clouded by madness, then the reality of his love may be distorted. The poem's resistance to a singular interpretation adds to its power, as it conveys both the beauty of love and the intense and sometimes troubling ways it can impact individuals. Annabel Lee is a complex exploration of the multifaceted nature of love and its effects on the human psyche. The second theme I want to discuss here deals with death and grief. Annabel Lee addresses a recurring theme in Poe's writing, the death of a beautiful young woman. The poem depicts this death as the most tragic of all, as it robs the world of youth, beauty and innocence. The focus is primarily on the narrator's grief, which permeates every line of the poem. It portrays how grief clings to a person and refuses to let go, a sentiment amplified by the added tragedy of a life cut short. The poem does not present a clear, concise argument about death and grief. Instead, it captures the disorientating and overwhelming nature of grief itself. The poem embodies this theme throughout, illustrating how grief can be all-consuming from beginning to end. The speaker in the poem is wholly defined by the death of their lover, whom they met as a child, and this childhood love seems to have consumed their entire life. Throughout the poem, it becomes evident that the only thought occupying the speaker's mind is the beautiful Annabel Lee. This grief not only shapes the speaker's past, but also dominates their present and future. The world and nature around them serve as constant reminders of Annabel Lee, from the chilling atmosphere of moonbeams, starlight and the sea. The speaker believes that their soul will never be separated from Annabel Lee, signifying an eternal connection and an everlasting grip of grief. The poem portrays grief as an unchangeable state similar to death itself. The repetition of the words Annabel Lee at the end of every other line, or in rhymes, reflects the speaker's constant circling back to the trauma of losing someone so young and beautiful. The poem also explores the romantic notion of innocence, as Annabel Lee's youth and beauty are portrayed as pure. Her death intensifies the sense of tragedy in the poem, while also preserving her in eternal youthful beauty. The poem also portrays the speaker's grief as having no outlet for solace. Unlike some who turn to family or spirituality in times of grief, the speaker finds no comfort in these avenues. He believes that religion, represented by the angels, played a role in Annabel Lee's death, and the jealousy and malice have destroyed any possible solace he could find in faith. Additionally, there seems to be no positive connection with Annabel Lee's family, referred to as highborn kinsmen, as the speaker mentions only that they took her away. The speaker also disparages the older and wiser people in this world, suggesting that they wouldn't understand the perfect young love he shared with Annabel Lee. His sense of isolation is further emphasised, indicating that the pain of the losing of a loved one can be exacerbated by feeling alone in that pain. The speaker appears entirely isolated, adding to the depth of his grief and sense of despair. The poem ultimately feels overwhelmed by the weight of the unending grief, with no hint of a possible escape. The conclusion of the poem depicts the speaker's environment merging with his grief, as the moon and stars serve only to evoke memories of Annabel Lee. Even the sea, with its constant sounding, emphasises the perpetual silence of his deceased lover. The speaker expresses a desire to join Annabel Lee in her tomb, and though it is unclear whether this is meant literally or figuratively, as a sense of feeling as if he is lying beside her, it is evident that the speaker is emotionally imprisoned by his grief. As such, the poem conveys a sense of suffocation as the grief becomes all-encompassing, leaving no apparent way out for the speaker. So it's time to wrap up the second episode for Season 5 and say goodbye. I hope you enjoyed this week's poem. Next week we'll be featuring a poem by John Donne. To support our work, please subscribe to the podcast or to our YouTube channel. You can also visit our website at www.litpoetry.com. A video clip of this week's poem is now live on YouTube. We'll finish by listening one more time to the poem. Thanks for listening in, and I'll see you next time.
Annabel Lee by Edgar Allan Poe. It was many and many a year ago, in a kingdom by the sea, that a maiden there lived whom you may know, by the name of Annabel Lee. And this maiden, she lived with no other thought than to love and be loved by me. I was a child, and she was a child, in this kingdom by the sea. But we loved with a love that was more than love, I and my Annabel Lee, with a love that the winged seraphs of heaven coveted her and me. And this was the reason that, long ago, in this kingdom by the sea, a wind blew out of a cloud, chilling my beautiful Annabel Lee, so that her high-born kinsman came and bore her away from me, to shut her up in a sepulchre in this kingdom by the sea. The angels, not half so happy in heaven, went envying her and me. Yes, that was the reason, as all men know, in this kingdom by the sea, that the wind came out of the cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee. But our love, it was stronger by far than the love of those who are older than we, of many far wiser than we, and neither the angels in heaven above nor the demons down under the sea can ever dissever my soul from the soul of the beautiful Annabel Lee. For the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of the beautiful Annabel Lee, and the stars never rise but I feel the bright eyes of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And so, all the night tide I lie down by the side of my darling, my life and my bride, in her sepulchre there by the sea, in her tomb by the sounding sea.
You've been listening to the Lit Poetry Podcast, presented by James Laidler. For more podcasts, poetry videos, and other useful resources, visit our website at www.litpoetry.com. Thanks for listening.